Residency for HARPTA purposes, non-military individuals and Form N-289. I'm Brad Konishi, CPA, and I'm the president of HARPTA Help. There are 4 levels of defense against HARPTA. The first is Form N-289. Form N-289 allows for an immediate and complete HARPTA waiver. You'll receive this form from escrow when you go into contract. There are legal limits as to who can turn in this form, and it's also subject to the buyer's approval. This video today is going to focus on the N-289 and residency, which is the most important issue usually on the Form N-289. But just keep in mind, from a big picture view, there are other levels of defense against HARPTA. Form N-289 is actually the most powerful and the most immediate. However, there's a Form N-288B. Form N-288B, if a home seller is not eligible for a waiver via Form N-289, this may be an option for them. This is a form that gets reviewed and approved by the State Department of Tax if you want a HARPTA waiver. It can be filed no later than 10 business days prior to the close of your sale. If you can't fill in a Form N-289 or an N-288B, after closing, there's something called a Form N-288C. If they weren't able to get a waiver or HARPTA and HARPTA is withheld, they can apply for an early tentative refund after closing. The filing only happens in the year of sale after the sale has closed. Our clients typically receive their refund in 60 to 75 days after closing. Also, too, if you don't get the early refund, you can just wait until the following year and complete a Hawaii income tax return. If the home seller doesn't get a waiver or early refund, they can file a Hawaii income tax return and receive a refund in the following year. The home seller actually has 3 years from the due date of the original tax return to claim their HARPTA refund. So some of the 2 sources that I use to put this presentation together. First one is Tax Information Release 2017-01. This is a publication that's put out by the Department of Tax that is specifically about HARPTA. In addition, I've referred to Tax Information Release 97-1, which is a publication that the State Department of Tax puts out related to residency status for people who are subject to HARPTA. So let's first talk about Form N-289. As a seller, you'll receive this when you go into escrow, known as going into contract. If you're legally entitled to check one of these 3 boxes, you can do so and get an immediate waiver of HARPTA. If none of the boxes applies to you, you are not entitled to receive an immediate waiver of this withholding, but you can potentially apply for a waiver. So Hawaii residency, that's the first box in the N-289. Although everyone who sells Hawaii real estate is subject to HARPTA, Hawaii residents are allowed an immediate waiver by checking box 1 in the N-289. So for HARPTA, the only residency that matters is the seller's state of residency on the date that the sale closes. If the seller is not a resident on the date that they close, they cannot check box 1. And that doesn't matter if somebody was just a brand new resident or if they were a resident for decades. The only thing that matters is their residency on the date that they actually close their sale. Although HARPTA may apply to the transaction for a non-resident home seller, there are several ways to get HARPTA waived, even if a person is a non-resident. Those ways are covered in other videos. This video addresses HARPTA for Hawaii non-residents and the Form N-289. So one thing to keep in mind is that no action alone turns a Hawaii non-resident into a resident. Having Hawaii's driver's license, registering to vote in the state, even filing Hawaii income tax returns doesn't guarantee that you're a resident. None of these alone determines a person's residency status. Residency status for the seller is determined by the totality of their circumstances as of their close date. So everything is considered. Factors that can that help in determining residency. These are some of the questions you might ask yourself. Where will you be living on the date that you actually close your sale? Where will you be working on that date? If you are working in another state, is that job temporary? If you have a spouse and or children, where will they be living? Where are they working or attending school? If you report that you are still a Hawaii resident on the date you close, What evidence can you offer that supports this? So there are two ways to establish residency in Hawaii. The first way is establishing residency by domicile, and the other way is by physical presence. Domicile, residency by domicile. Domicile defined. This is the place of the individual's true, fixed, permanent home and principal establishment, and to which place the individual has the intention of returning whenever the individual is absent. An individual can only have one domicile at a time. If you're in the process of moving to another state, it's probably not proper to claim Hawaii residency by domicile if you're living or working in another state or have specific plans to do so on the date that you actually close. You can also establish residency by physical presence. Physical presence within the state may be another way to establish residency, but if their presence in the state is temporary or transitory, they cannot usually use their presence to claim residency. If someone was a Hawaii resident but is selling their home and moving out of state, even if they're physically present in Hawaii on their close date, their presence is usually temporary or transitory and thus not able to be used towards their residency status. Students and military service members who live in Hawaii may generally not use their presence as their reason to claim residency in the state of Hawaii. So questions that I get asked frequently. I've read that someone who has been physically present in Hawaii for 200 days in the taxable year is presumed to be a resident. Is this true? If someone is claiming residency in Hawaii due to the 200-day safe harbor rule, their presence in Hawaii cannot be temporary or transitory, or residency will be denied. In addition, if their presence is due to military orders, a military service member may not use presence in the state to justify residency. If a home seller is not a resident on the date that they close their sale, they cannot claim residency, Hawaii residency on Form N-289. I've been a Hawaii resident for over 20 years, but I'm selling my home to move to the mainland. Am I a Hawaii resident for HARPTA purposes? Well, one thing that's important to understand is that prior residency doesn't matter for HARPTA purposes, only residency on the date that you actually close your sale. Also keep in mind that changing state residency isn't defined by any single action or group of actions. For most people who move away, establishing residency outside of Hawaii happens automatically. If you're living or working in another state on the date that you close, you don't have specific plans for moving back to Hawaii, you are likely not a Hawaii resident on the date that you close. If you were a Hawaii resident and you're selling a home you used to live in to move to the mainland, you will almost certainly be a non-resident on the date that you close your sale. Even if you're still in Hawaii, physically present on the date that your sale closes, your presence does not make you a Hawaii resident. If you're living and working outside of Hawaii, or you have specific plans to move to live and work outside of Hawaii, you have likely given up your Hawaii residency and cannot claim an exemption of HARPTA on box 1 of N-289. Let's look at other possible ways to get an immediate HARPTA waiver by checking a box on Form N-289. The second box on Form N-289 are for non-recognition provisions or United States treaties. Non-recognition provisions are transactions where unrecognized gain and losses are carried into the new asset. When the asset is sold, the realized gain or loss from the first transaction is recognized. So non-recognition provisions and treaties. Let's talk about some examples. 1031 exchanges are the most popular type of non-recognition provisions. However, things like sales within a self-directed IRA or 401k, transfers of property between spouses incident to divorce, sales by a foreign person who is a citizen of a country that has a tax treaty with the U.S. which prohibits this withholding. Those types of things may be included in Box 2. The following are not non-recognition provisions and cannot be used to get you an immediate waiver of HARPTA. Things like the main home gain exclusion, also known as Section 121, that is not a non-recognition provision. A permanent change of station for military purposes, that is not considered to be a non-recognition provision. The third box in Form N-289 is the $300,000 main home provision. So if your home sales price was $300,000 or less, and you lived in it as your main home for the last year, you are allowed to check box 3 to get an immediate HARPTA waiver. One thing to keep in mind, HARPTA withholdings are large, so enforcement is a high priority for the State Department of Tax. Attempts to evade or defeat this withholding may face the following punishments. Class C felony, fines of up to $100,000 and imprisonment of up to 5 years. So if you'd like to talk about HARPTA and your situation, please give us a call. You can reach us at harpta.com. Or you can email us at info@harpta.com or area code 808-737-4412. Thank you for contacting HARPTA Help.